This is a Pride GoGo Ultra X. It uses the same or similar transaxle as other Pride models such as the Elite, ES, and Sport. And if you have a different brand, the technology is very similar. I decided to take apart the transaxle because it was running rough and making a ratchety grinding noise. And a new transaxle cost about $350. So I decided to see if it was fixable. And spoiler alert, in this case it was. It required the replacement of this wheel bearing, which can be purchased on Amazon for less than $10. The second wheel bearing didn't fail, but is also available on Amazon. I was unable to find gear parts, so lucky none of them failed. Let me know if you have a supplier for gear parts in the comments. You'll need the following tools: Phillips screwdriver, 13mm socket, size 4 and 6 hex keys, and wheel bearing grease. The grease in the transaxle is extremely messy, so you should have paper towels, gloves, and newspapers so you can contain the mess. The unit is modular. You just unlatch it from the scooter, and you have the transaxle assembly. Be sure to take lots of pictures to help you put it back together if my video isn't clear enough. The first thing to do is to remove the handle and cover. There's just 4 simple Phillips screws, and make sure you keep track of all of them. I've already torn down this several times, so I've minimized the steps. It's actually pretty simple. This is the power coupler, and to remove this, you use the 4mm hex key. We're going to remove the motor next, and it's only 3 hex screws, the middle one being the shortest. And so be careful when removing it, because the motor will drop down as soon as you unloosen the last screw. There's going to be 2 little pieces that are part of the motor, so don't lose these two pieces. So we're going to unbolt the drive shaft from the chassis frame with a 6 hex key and a 13mm socket. Make sure you keep track of all the parts. And now we're going to start unbolting the screws from the transaxle with the number 4 key, and we just start unscrewing. Okay, and now we're ready to pull apart the transaxle. Make sure the main section is on the bottom, otherwise all the gears will fall out. Start to pull up and rock it gently while you're pulling until the unit separates, but try to pull it straight up. And try not to damage that gasket, otherwise we don't have a replacement for it. So just make sure you keep that gasket there. Now you can see all the gears after opening it up. That's pretty much what's inside. So here we examine the motor drive, and we can see that there's some wear and slight damage. This washer is what's left of the wheel bearing that got disintegrated. It got stuck there, and I had to pry it off. Now I have to look for all the pieces of the bearing and remove them to prevent further damage to the gears. Afterward, I need to sand it a little for the new bearing to fit better. The following are pictures and videos of the interior of the gearbox. And if you look here, you'll see a part from the wheel bearing that was disintegrated. So we need to remove all the old disintegrated parts so that it doesn't damage the gears even more. This is where the wheel bearing was, that little circle there. And this is the gearbox removed, the gears removed. Notice the washer there, there's only one washer. And here are the parts that I removed so far. Trying to get all of them, but it's hard to tell with all the grease in the way. So this is the other part of the gearbox. And if you look inside closely, you could see a ball bearing in there. I need to remove that. And that's a picture of the wheel bearings. And this is the wheel bearing that does go in that slot, so we just need to replace that. This part shows damaged, slightly worn and damaged part of the gear. And what the problem with that is, it caused a ticking sound. You know, after you repair everything, there's a little ticking sound you'll hear later. Unfortunately, I can't find replacements for these gears. I don't know where we can buy that. So if that's completely damaged, then I don't know. Maybe you can find a donor scooter. And before we reinstall everything, make sure you grease everything with wheel bearing grease, just to get it lubricated properly. I haven't shown it here on the video, but that's what you should do. I've already installed the wheel bearing inside, so we just install the motor drive. Everything pretty much slips right in. Just want to spin it around to show you the entire view. So we need to place the larger part of the transaxle on the bottom, just like this. Then we can insert the unit back together again. And we need to pull up from the bottom so that it rejoins the top part. And we need to put one screw in place. Then we go back on top so we can bolt the drive shaft back onto the frame. I don't have torque measurements or anything on how much to tighten. You're just going to have to guess. I tighten it so that it's slightly difficult to loosen. You might want to retighten the bolts and screws after riding it a bit. For the transaxle bolts, I like to use a star pattern so that the entire unit tightens up evenly. And again, tighten the bolts enough so that it's slightly difficult to loosen. And check it later after you ride it a bit. Now the motor. Reinsert the two small pieces first. Then we can place the motor on top. It's probably not going to drop in place until you spin it around a little bit. And now we need to get at least one bolt installed before flipping it over. Remember, the shorter bolt is in the middle. And you can flip it over to insert the other two bolts. So we have the power coupler. The nice thing is you can use the marks on the metal so it'll guide you where to tighten it, which is how it was tightened before. Before we put the cover and handle back in place, we're at a point where we can at least test the unit. And here we go. And now that we've tested it, it's time to put it back together. Very simple with 4 screws and we're done. So thank you for watching. So like, subscribe, and hit notify. Thank you.